I'm going to talk about digital portfolios and the way that we use them in my program. And our program is actually a MS program, so a Master of Science program. And we also have it combined with a BAMS, sort of a 4+1 program for students. And yeah. So the language, I just want to say a little bit at the beginning about language. People talk about digital portfolios, and that gets used interchangeably with e-portfolios, which is a kind of antiquated term now. People don't use that terminology as much. But if you wanted to find out more, there's a ton of peer-reviewed literature about digital portfolios or e-portfolios. Either way you want to talk about it. I just on a quick Google Scholar search got almost 20,000 results for that. There was a time in the early 2000s when there were a bunch of conferences, academic conferences about e-portfolios. And I kind of realized that that moment had disappeared when I mentioned digital portfolios to one of my colleagues in my department who was like, "What's a digital portfolio?" And I was like, "Oh, you missed that moment in the early 2000s." So there's a vast array of literature on this. And I just want to sort of shout out and give credit to Barbara Walters, not the journalist, but one of our colleagues here at CUNY who led the charge here at CUNY around e-portfolios and how they could be useful in teaching and learning. And she's since retired. She was at Kingsborough Community College, but she led a group of CUNY faculty interested in e-portfolios for many, many years. And I learned a lot from her. So thanks, Barbara. Okay, so here's one of our students who recently graduated, Tracia, and she did a terrific job with her e-portfolio. And I'm just going to take you through a couple of screenshots of her portfolio. If you'd like to look it up on your own, you can check her out at her URL, which is there in the bottom of the screen. Part of what she did in this portfolio is that she has these different sections, and I'm just going to mouse over these home about education and skills, and then a contact page, which are the basic elements that we use. And on her skills page, part of what she's done here, based on the way that we teach this in my program, is that she's connecting her skills and the coursework that she did to the learning objectives in the program. Okay. So what are the elements that we require in these digital portfolios? They need a home page, they need an about page. Sometimes those are the same, but that's a discussion. And then a section with subpages called My Work, where they list out the courses they took, they feature some of their writing, and then they highlight their key skills. And their students are creative, they do this lots of different ways. But really what I try to teach them to do is to link it from each learning objective to a specific assignment that they did in one of their classes and link it to that. We also have an internship requirement for all of our students. And, sometimes there are issues of confidentiality that come up with internships, but mostly what they're doing is they're analyzing data that's not proprietary. And so they can do something from those internships and put it on their digital portfolios, like perhaps there's a data visualization that you created at this internship, or there's a report that you wrote about, whatever the work is that they're doing at that agency where you did an internship. Okay, so our learning objectives for the program are as follows. I won't go through and read all of these, but I do want to sort of highlight that along the way, one of our, I guess it's the fourth one on this bulleted list, is developing a Gantt chart, which is like a super basic project director sort of skill level. So we have these kind of applied elements in our learning objectives already. Okay, so that's what that looks like on the layout of these elements look like on a digital portfolio, or just a website is another way of talking about it. And then the subpages are as follows. Okay, so what kind of work do students post? They post papers, they post presentations, they do data visualizations. Sometimes there are podcast episodes. We've had classes in our program before where instructors have help students create podcast episodes. I'm doing that one in my classes now. And also we do a whole sort of tutorial around images and photos that students themselves have created. So we get into a whole conversation about copyright and how that affects the kind of images that you have on your site. And then the final element are hyperlinks. What are you linking out to? Mostly this is students' work that they've created, but sometimes it's peer-reviewed articles that they've, been a part of or partnered with faculty to create. So what's the purpose of digital portfolios? First of all, I really think that they give students a kind of confidence about the digital world. A lot of times students come in really overwhelmed by digital media, social media. They find it toxic increasingly. And so in some ways, there's a real hesitation around creating the digital portfolio for a lot of our students because they've been so indoctrinated with this idea that the whole of the internet is sort of stranger danger and you should stay off of it. And this is really giving the opposite advice. No, you need to have a little part of the internet that you control and you can say what you want to about your own identity, your own image, your own work in the world. Second, I really think that the digital portfolios deepen learning and they are a great way to demonstrate mastery over the material that we're teaching in the program. A part of this is also about the formative and summative assessment of their learning. So formative is, you're learning as you're creating the portfolio, as you go through the program. And then the summative is sort of at the end, you look back and go, oh, wow, I really did learn a lot from this program. I think that increasingly, especially post-pandemic, our students really lack confidence, not just in our program, but across the board. I see this. And I think the digital portfolios, if there's enough scaffolding to help them create that and feel good about it, can help counter the sort of crisis of confidence that we're seeing in the classroom. And finally, I think that the digital portfolios help showcase the skills of the students for potential employers. If I'm recommending a student for an internship or a job outside of Hunter or even within Hunter, it's great to be able to link to their portfolio and say, this is a student I'm talking about. Aren't they amazing? And a final thing that I think it's good for is it helps showcase what students are learning for family and for friends. And I think this is really important for our students who are often first generation college students. And so a lot of times there's a disconnect with their families about, why they're in college, what they're doing, what kinds of things they're learning. So it's really useful in that way.
Hey, everybody. I'm Laura Palermo, and I teach one particular course at the Human Bio program, which is embedded into anthropology here at Hunter College. And that's my email address if you want to say hi or if you have any questions for me. Why am I telling you this? I'm a biologist. I was born and raised in Argentina. And I follow one path. My career started in one way, and I learned, I think, over the years of how important it is to change. And so I'm a biologist. I studied back in Buenos Aires. I came to America to do my PhD in microbiology many years ago. Then went and did my postdoctoral fellowship here in New York City at the medical school, Cornell Medical School. Then I worked at Columbia University. And more than a decade ago, I started teaching classes, science classes, like hardcore science. And then I started teaching science for students who they didn't really want to become scientists. And so I had to learn how to teach science for not necessarily somebody who will do a PhD in science. And I was lucky to come to Hunter College in 2020, just before the pandemic, lucky me. And I became a Career Success Fellows last year. When I arrived to Hunter and the pandemic hit, I started to feel alone, and it was hard for me to get to know the students. But when I started seeing my students, I realized that they come from different backgrounds, they have different ideas. Sometimes they really, really, really know what they want to do in their lives, and they have a clear path. And sometimes they were lost. And our major is big. We have more than 1,000 students. And so, there are a lot of students who are not necessarily, they don't know exactly what they want to do with their life and with their careers. And so at that time in 2020, 2021, I talked to another scientist that I met virtually in one of those pandemic seminars. And I said, look, Abby, we need to do something about this. Our students sometimes, they are not aware of all the different career paths. And so we put together a speaker series at the time, bringing professionals, people that we know, students that we got to meet in our classes, and we brought them back to Hunter to talk about their career paths. And I think that was a really successful experience. And my colleague left Hunter College at one point. She was recruited by other institutions. So I switched gears and I sort of invited to participate in this speaker series to now they're a friend of mine, Professor Julia Schiello here at the Anthropology Department and Human Bio Program, and Michelle Coleman, an amazing advisor that we have in our program. So together we bring to the speaker series different ideas. We have different professionals that we know, and because Michelle is an advisor who meets many of our students, she realizes, what the students want. And over the semesters, we get feedback from the people who participate in our speaker series, and they tell us what they want to know more about. And so one of the key elements of our speaker series is to bring alumni, students who were human bio majors here at Hunter, and they move forward. And so we invite them back and we ask them to share their experiences, the good experiences, the not so good experiences. I mean, everything counts, And so I'm showing you here the first flyer that we had a couple of years ago. And you can see that we invite professionals, people who had a PhD in the sciences, but we also invite alumni, students who just graduated, or maybe they are in the first or second year post-graduation. We did this every semester. Every semester we put together a speaker series, and we do it very proudly. Maybe one advice, if you are in a program and you want to create something like this, I would recommend that you need to get some funding, some support, some financial support. So here at Hunter, we were able to secure some funds from the presidential initiatives to increase student engagement. And so it's not a lot of money, but we can pay a symbolic stipend to our speakers, which I think is very important. This speaker series, because we started them in the pandemic, during the pandemic, they are virtual, they're online. And we realize that sometimes that's a good thing, that really gives the opportunity to students to participate, even though they are not, they're in between classes or in between jobs and classes. Sometimes we have some of the seminars in person, but we also give the opportunity to participate online. I'm showing you here a picture of one of our seminars that we put together here at Hunter in person and virtually, both of them. This is a speaker that we invited, Nick Martinez. He's the Assistant Director of Youth Initiatives at the American Museum of Natural History. And these seminars are well attended. Sometimes we have, this particular time, I think we had more than 100 students participating in person together, in person and virtually. Nick is one of these examples of somebody who really is interested in science, but move forward into a job that is really fulfilling for him, participating in the museum, the American Museum of Natural History. So he shared a lot of opportunities for our students to work, to do internships, to work in the summer. The students really like it. And, for many of them were the first time to realize that there are so many good options out there in the museum here in the city. This is the speaker series that we put together this semester. We started indeed yesterday with our first speakers. And this is something that, these speakers, Linda Levin and Navida Viñoles, they come from CUNY, and I got to know them because I participated as a career fellow. And so when we were in one of these seminars, Amna Malik came to talk about internships, paid internships for our students. And so I realized that's a great opportunity that our students have, and I was not aware, only through being a career fellow, I realized. And so I decided to invite people who work in the same program to share the type of internships that are available for the students, how to apply, when to apply, the requirements. I mean, the students were really engaged. We had 50 students showing up yesterday in that seminar. More to come. We have a licensed mental health counselor tomorrow coming to our seminar. We have genetic counselors, students, former students who are in nursing school or working in different institutions in the city. So this is one of the ideas that we had before, and I think that it's very helpful for the students to see what's available out there. And the last, well, this is if you want to apply for any of these small grants. I think that the presidential initiatives to increase student engagement is a great thing. Look at the link over there in the background at the end. You can support activities for the students, field trips, if the students want to go to a conference, or any activity like I do can be funded by this. So I highly recommend that one. And the last thing I want to share today, sorry if I'm taking too much time, I'm not timing myself. Because I was a career fellow, my program, my boss, Professor Rothman, invited me to be part of this application. So we as a program, the human biology program, we apply to a career grant initiative that CUNY put together, the CUNY Inclusive Economy Initiative. And the process was a little painful, but it was worth doing it. And I had the pleasure also to meet Keith, who is here in the audience today, when we applied to this initiative, this program. It was great. I mean, and I learned a lot just by doing the application, going to the interviews, and we had to think about how we see our program. So I highly recommend to apply to a grant as a program with your division, your department, with colleagues. I think that sometimes it's a good excuse to meet new faculty, to meet maybe your neighbor, the person who works next to you, and you never had the chance to see them. And so we applied to this grant and we got it. And so our program will incorporate 2 advisors, a career advisors and a specialist. So I think that this is great, and I'm looking forward. I'm sure that a lot of students will benefit from having these 2 advisors available for them. I think this is it. Thank you for listening.
And I'll just mention how I got involved in all of this. I teach a class called CUNY Rare Book Scholars. It's a history of the book course, but the approach is very hands-on, so it involves going around to different libraries and collections around the city. And over the years, I've had a lot of students in English who have been interested in libraries and have gone on to careers as librarians. And one of the places that we went was the Asia Society, and it ended up being very fruitful because the contact there then was looking for an intern. I recommended my student, who you'll see later in a video, and it really opened up a new career path for him in curatorial work. So in any event, I will say going now, I haven't gone to all of these places in one semester, but these are the places that I've gone to. But usually we go to, at least 8. And they're all fabulous archives, fabulous collections. And what else can I tell you about that? It's a pain taking to students to these places because you have to coordinate it, but it's worth it. Time and time again, I have students who've never been to the Met on 79th Street, and There's so many fabulous collections for the history of the book around the city that, we're sort of spoiled for choice. I'll also mention that Sotheby's, which is the last one on the list, um, has been in many ways one of the most exciting places for students to go. Whatever is up on auction is, like a museum quality exhibition, and it's free. Anyone can walk in anytime to look at it. And I think it really inspired a lot of students to think about themselves in curatorial or, somehow involved in archives and so a few of the things I've tried to do, and as Jessie mentioned, a lot of these things are things my department has been doing for several years already. We have something called a student engagement committee. We have a welcome event. Usually there's about 60 or 70 students. And but making resources visible has been um, something that we realized we needed to do. And so we made this terrific information card. It's like a foldable card. I'm sorry, I don't have an image here, but it has information about the English department, about advising, internships, Mellon May's career fellowships, not career, uh, hopefully you know what the Mellon Mays Fellowship is, but there are, different kinds of opportunities available for students. The Thomas Hunter's Honors Program, Study Abroad, Brothers in Excellence, all on one card, so that majors, when they come to these events, can sort of grab it and then know where all the offices are, wellness, etc. And because I was collaborating with Jessie, I learned about this great video that she'd made for the Master's in Digital Sociology. And I realized we need a video for the English department to promote our majors, to promote course offerings, internships, connections to careers. But I ran into an obstacle, which is that we didn't have funding for it. I asked the CUNY Career Success Fellows to fund it, and they rejected the idea. Um, we asked the Hunter administration, we applied for grants. We never heard back about it to this day. Tenaciously, I asked my department for money, and they funded it. And I'll show it to you at the end. Two other good things that came out of career success is that, we now have, we're trying to design a pre-law track in the English major. We have a lot of students who go into law in our department, but we've never really had a formal track for them. So we're trying to design that and think about how to do that. And that's through the Student Engagement Committee. And then finally, what to do with an English humanities degree event we have on April 9th. And I'll show you the poster. I can get to it here. I joined partnership with Iris Finkel in the Hunter Libraries. And together we're putting on this event. We've got English department alumni, some from academia, publishing, feminism and advocacy, law, and then a whole list of special guest librarians and a wonderful curator from the Morgan Library and Museum. And it will be at the library, and we'll have vegetarian food, and hopefully a lot of students will come. We usually have one of these every semester anyway. The only difference is that this is just one that Iris and I put together ourselves. And then finally, I want to show you a quick 2-minute video that we put together. And I will say that the videographer is excellent. Her name is Tatiana, and I got her through Jessie, and she just did an amazing job, and we had a student. Um, the inspiration for this was Jessie's video and also something I saw on a SUNY Binghamton website, which is called the 1 Minute Major. and it has a student talking about what it's like to be a major in that department and what's great about it. And so we just kind of modeled it along those lines. So I'll just play it for you.
Hi, my name is Pierre Sanin. I go by any pronouns, and I am an English major at Hunter College. Some of my favorite classes were multi-ethnic American literature with Professor Richardson. She is incredibly knowledgeable and pushes her students to take their time with the literature, really absorb it, really go sentence by sentence and understand everything. Survey of British Literature, for example, with Professor Rita Tobin. It took a more hard approach to reading, whereas instead of diving into metaphor and meaning, you kind of looked at literature very objectively. Recently, I took a class with Professor Robbins, pre-20th century American poetry. Professor Robbins' teaching style is welcoming, inviting, open. I felt very safe in her hands to synthesize the poetry in my own way. That was a really defining moment for me in terms of my journey through English. One of my favorite classes of all times was CUNY Rare Books with Professor Hennessey. We got to go to different museums and libraries around the city. We got to see a lot of really, really cool historical objects in person that were extremely fascinating to be able to see so up close. Through those wonderful opportunities that the English department offers, I was very lucky to be able to have the Asia Society internship brought to my attention. I was able to do a lot of curatorial work. I got to see 2 exhibitions come to life from scratch, and I was able to use my English skills in terms of reading, writing, and editing to help with didactics and panels. It's been a very good hand-in-hand procession as well. If you are a student that is sort of hesitant to participate, that is another beautiful thing about the English department, that they will push you to explore even outside of English. They will push you to be a part of this beautiful city in ways that you may have not realized were available to you before.
So that's the video. I was very happy with the way that it turned out. And yeah, and if anyone is going forward, the next round of career fellows, I would say, posters, advertisement. I feel like in our department, internships were often a just something that students weren't as aware of. It was always available to them to earn credit, etc. But now, we've got better advertising, and we're trying to include information in the intro to the major class, which is something called English 252, where at that point, students, they get the card from the English department with all the information, and then they'll learn a little bit about internship opportunities. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a great way to earn college credit while they're in college. So it's an opportunity that shouldn't be missed. So in any event, that's about it. Thank you.